Atlantic put out an article last year, and it was called "Separating Sports by Sex Doesn't Make Sense."
Right.
And talked about how we separate sports like the WNBA and the just because it's just socialization. This is insane.
I agree.
Okay. That's why people vote for Trump. Mm-hmm. Because there's stuff like that on the left that people just go, I know Trump's horrible, but separating sports by sex makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. And if you think it doesn't, you can't leave the country. Senator Schiff, given the ongoing political tensions and Trump's actions toward his critics, do you think President Biden's preemptive pardons turned out to be more important than initially expected? Let's first tell people what that means, preemptive pardons. That was pretty unprecedented, right? Before he left office, Joe Biden pardoned you and a number of people who he thought Trump would go after.
No, I take the opposite view. I don't think he should have given the pardons at all.
Really?
No, I don't think he should have, and I was vocal about that at the time.
Can you refuse a pardon?
That's less clear because in the case of the January 6th committee, he pardoned us.
Bill Maher caught Adam Schiff off guard in a live TV exchange that quickly shifted from routine to uncomfortable. What started as a standard back and forth slowly tightened into a moment Schiff didn't seem ready for. Maher didn't push or overplay it. He simply let Schiff speak, followed his logic, and then flipped the context at the right moment. When the point landed, it was already too late to reframe it, leaving an awkward silence in its wake. Hit subscribe, get comfortable, and let's break it down.
From the administration, the president had the constitutional authority to direct the use of military force because he could reasonably determine that such use of force was in the national interest. That's too vague for you?
Totally vague.
Okay, because that's from Obama about Libya.
Well, Obama made the argument initially that he could go into Syria without an authorization. I and many others pushed back on that argument. Ultimately, he did not go forward with going after Assad, even though Assad was gassing his own people, because he thought he might lose the vote in Congress. But I respect the fact that was important to him, and the fact that he did not have the support of Congress.
Maher didn't just challenge Schiff in this moment. He set a quiet trap. He read out a statement describing the reasoning behind the intervention in Libya and asked whether it sounded too vague. Schiff immediately agreed, without hesitation or nuance. But what he didn't realize was that he had reacted before knowing the source. The twist came when Maher revealed the words weren't from Trump at all. They were from Obama. At that point, the tone of the exchange shifted instantly. Schiff tried to pivot toward discussing former President Assad, but the inconsistency was already exposed in real time. The moment highlighted how strongly context can shape judgment and how quickly that judgment can flip when the origin of a statement changes.
I think it's true justice. The only thing he cares about is himself and money, and going after the money is a way to bring about.
And that's the core issue being raised here. The standard of interpretation doesn't always stay consistent. When Trump is involved, even neutral or vague phrasing is often treated as evidence of the worst possible intent: corruption, chaos, or deliberate harm, where every word is pulled toward a negative conclusion. But when similar ambiguity or comparable reasoning comes from more established political figures, the reaction often shifts. The tone becomes softer, the scrutiny less intense, and the explanations more forgiving. Maher keeps circling this idea because it reflects something audiences can recognize in real time: how quickly judgment changes depending on who is speaking. Once people notice that pattern of uneven treatment, it becomes hard to ignore in future political discussions.
Given the ongoing political tensions and Trump's actions toward his critics, do you think President Biden's preemptive pardons turned out to be more important than initially expected? Let's first tell people what that means, preemptive pardons. That was pretty unprecedented, right? Before he left office, Joe Biden pardoned you and a number of people who he thought Trump would go after.
No, I take the opposite view. I don't think he should have given the pardons at all.
Really?
No, I don't think he should have, and I was vocal about that at the time.
Can you refuse a pardon?
That's less clear because in the case of the January 6th committee, he pardoned essentially the whole committee.
Maher then shifts into another uncomfortable line of questioning around the pardon issue. Schiff argues that Biden shouldn't have issued preemptive pardons in the first place, but that immediately raises the obvious follow-up question: if there was truly nothing to worry about, why issue them at all? That's where the tension sits. It doesn't, on its own, prove any wrongdoing or settle anything definitively, but it does create political friction and difficult optics. And once those kinds of contradictions are out in the open, they tend to linger. People keep returning to the same question because the explanation rarely feels fully satisfying or completely resolved.
Sharing your pessimism about this or your pessimism about the general election, the reason why Joe Biden is going to beat Donald Trump is because at the end of the day, America is going to want a president who is a decent human being, who doesn't shit on other people, who has some interest in the American people, some interest in something beyond himself. I think at the end of the day, people are going to reject this bigoted, divisive.
Now, before the 2024 election, Schiff spoke with a high level of confidence about how the political landscape would play out, framing Trump's chances as limited and suggesting voters would ultimately reject him. That certainty in tone and expectation seemed clear at the time. But the outcome complicated that narrative, as Trump's support proved more durable and wider than many forecasts had suggested, extending beyond his core base and into unexpected voter groups in key battleground areas. That shift is what made Schiff's earlier confidence look increasingly disconnected from what actually unfolded. In hindsight, it highlighted a gap between political expectations in Washington and the realities of voter behavior, reinforcing the idea that even seasoned politicians can misread the direction of the electorate.
And I'm just getting tired of seeing so much stuff targeted in his direction, but somehow, some way he still survives. I mean, we're talking about a situation where he's still going to be the GOP nominee. He's still going to be running for president. You're President Biden. That's the individual that you're going to have to beat. 4 indictments, 91 counts. They ain't even bringing up the bankruptcies, ain't even bringing up this particular issue with this civil case, and somehow, some way, he puts cats to shame because he clearly has more than 9 lives.
And here's the striking part. Throughout Trump's political rise, the DNC and its allies leveled a wide range of attacks aimed at undermining his credibility, from serious allegations to accusations of vote buying and repeated claims labeling him as a fascist or authoritarian. The messaging was constant and, at times, felt unified across multiple institutions, all reinforcing the same theme: discredit him at any cost. Yet despite that pressure, Trump remained firmly at the center of American politics. He didn't fade from relevance, and he continued to maintain and even grow his support, ultimately securing electoral victories. That's where the strategy begins to show its limits. When criticism becomes nonstop, parts of the electorate may stop processing it as accountability and instead perceive it as fixation. Many voters weigh political messaging against their own observations and lived experience, which doesn't mean the criticism is automatically invalid. It simply shows that messaging has boundaries and public perception doesn't always align with strategic expectations.
And I put out an article last year and it was called "Separating Sports by Sex Doesn't Make Sense." Right. And talked about how we separate sports like the WNBA and just because it's just socialization. This is insane.
I agree.
Okay. That's why people vote for Trump. Mm-hmm. Because there's stuff like that on the left that people just go, I know Trump's horrible, but separating by sports by sex makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. And if you think it doesn't, you can't lead the country.
That's where the authenticity argument comes in. A lot of supporters see Trump as straightforward in a way that feels unfiltered, messy at times, even reckless, but still direct. The perception is that he doesn't overly polish his messaging or rely on carefully focus grouped language, and that creates a sense of what you see is what you get. When compared to more traditional politicians, who often speak in measured, scripted, and carefully structured responses, the contrast becomes more noticeable. Fair or not, some voters interpret that polished style as calculated, longer explanations as evasive, and rehearsed phrasing as emotional distance. In a highly skeptical political environment, bluntness can therefore register as sincerity, even when the delivery is rough or imperfect.
And so the FBI came in and arrested the judge. Now, I haven't heard that, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think I've ever read arrested a judge. So is this significant?
Well, I think
I I'm not going to comment on something I don't know more about than what you've just told me.
You read about it too.
Yeah, I mean, I read about it, but I don't know.
So you don't trust anything either, and you work for the New York Times.
This is where the discussion turns to media trust. Even figures inside major outlets like Bret Stephens have at times criticized aspects of media culture, which fuels debate about how editorial decisions are made. Critics argue that modern coverage can feel narrative-driven, where framing often comes first and facts are then fitted into it, shaped in part by attention and engagement incentives. This doesn't necessarily imply coordinated bias, but it does raise concerns about how stories are selected and presented. At the same time, internal disagreement in newsrooms can reflect independent thinking rather than a single unified agenda. Still, for skeptical audiences, these patterns can reinforce doubts about media balance, and once that skepticism takes hold, it becomes difficult to reverse.
Now it just looks like you're stalking him. I think in the eyes of the people who don't follow it that closely, which is most of the country, here's the thing about Bob Mueller. He's like the last person, maybe the last thing in America that left and right agreed on. Left and right basically agreed. This is a guy of honor. This is an honest guy. This is an honest broker. Whatever he says goes. Americans are not into details. Don't read it to me, Bob. Just give me a thumbs up, a thumbs down. The fact that he was like, if you couldn't impeach before, how are you going to impeach?
Vinmar drives the point home using the Russia investigation as an example. For years, the public was led to expect a major, conclusive outcome, with the buildup creating a sense that a decisive revelation was imminent and just around the corner. But when the final results didn't fully match that level of expectation, the gap became significant because people felt they were given certainty, but ended up with ambiguity instead. Over time, that disconnect can weaken trust, especially when similar patterns repeat across different political narratives. Even serious claims can lose persuasive force when audiences feel outcomes consistently fall short of the intensity of the buildup, making viewers more skeptical and harder to fully convince.
Let's stop talking about Trump. We talk about him too much. We want to tell people what we're going to do for them. Healthcare, environment, those kind of issues. For example, I've seen you on TV a lot in the last couple of years. I know everything you know, or that you tell us, about the Russian situation. I don't have a clue what you think about healthcare. I've never heard it. Yeah. I don't know whether you're for Medicare for all, or improve Obamacare, or get a chicken. I don't know what.
At the end of it all, Maher's message lands less as a punchline or a simple gotcha moment and more as a broader critique. It points beyond a single interview or political figure toward a deeper frustration that runs through both politics and media, shifting standards, selective outrage, and polished answers that often go untested until they're examined more closely. For many viewers, moments like this resonate because they reflect a sense of fatigue with political messaging, fatigue with spin, rehearsed talking points, and language that feels carefully managed rather than directly responsive. What people tend to want instead is consistency and clarity, the same standards applied regardless of who is speaking, and answers that feel direct rather than evasive or overly constructed.